System riding to the core. Yeah. Reppin' inner city left.
This is the Inner City Left broadcast. Today is Thursday, July 9th. I'm Amin TMK alongside Emoja, Lil Tanky Sumler, and our very special guest, Dr. CBS. Dr. CBS, is so good to have you. I'm going to just tell the people a little bit about you so we can go straight to the work. A critical Black studies scholar of political theory, political economy, intellectual history, and political and historical sociology, the author of Black Scare, Red Scare, Theorizing Capitalist Racism in the United States, co-author along with Dr. Gerald Horne of W.E.B. Du Bois, A Life in American History, published works, been on all the best, coolest leftist podcasts, Real News Network, Breakthrough News, Black Myths, AJ Plus, Revolutionary Left Radio, Guerrilla History, Upstream, so on and so forth. So accomplished. Just finished an amazing This Is America series. Dr. CBS, welcome back to the show. And how are you doing today? Yes, let's give it up for Dr. CBS. Yay.
Thanks so much for having me again, y'all. I am, I'm doing okay, ready to head out of town tomorrow. So just have another thing tonight. So just, preparing, working.
I love it, man. I love it. Of course, we mentioned W.E.B. Du Bois. Y'all want to just go ahead and get right to it? The Bois. I lived in New Orleans for a long time, and I just Frenchified things. It's a curse. I need to decolonize my tongue. I'm working on that. But yeah. Right. And I don't know. In the South, we grew up with these horror stories, about how he used to have to go to the university with a rifle. You know what I'm saying? Even as an intellectual, understanding it, literally shit's still not sweet. You know what I'm saying? They're not going to, you can't present the superior argument to a bear and not get mauled, like Mr. Bear. You know what I'm saying? I think about, all of the pushback that Dr. Stacey Patton has went through, Tommy Curry, Dr. Tommy Curry, literally having to leave the country with his to continue his scholarship. How do you maintain in that world, right, where scholarship will not protect you? How do you continue to walk, in city and siege, in Dune terms?
I mean, I don't know where we got the conception that scholarship was supposed to protect us. I don't know why that would even be an expectation. I'm very known to say we have to believe our own analysis. And if we say that this is a white supremacist, settler colonial, patriarchal, war-driven, genocidal society, we have to expect that the institutions will reproduce those logics. Now, if we're thinking dialectically, we understand that these things kind of wax and wane generally in relationship to both interest convergence, to use the term of Derek Bell, but also our level of organization and fight back as the masses, so to speak, right, as those who are subjected to it. And so I think that the first way to withstand it is to not expect it to be otherwise. I think that secondly, yes, we experience repression to a certain degree. Yes, we experience discomfort. We experience prejudice, and even in some cases, violence. But I don't know that is constitutive of the realities of the academic today. Even getting docs, even getting these threats, we're relatively okay. And so I want to acknowledge some of the danger that does present itself. I also want to acknowledge some of the bourgeois liberal ethics that can make that threat hyperbolic. I'm okay, right? Even if a crazy person shows up at my office, even if I am doxxed online, even if I'm harassed online, which I have been, or even harassed in person, I'm relatively okay. And so I think that we have to be very sober in our understanding of what our actual position is and what the actual threats are. And then what about that are just our expectations? Did we think that our genius or our class position or our relative privilege and leisure somehow exempted us from the violent realities of this place? And if we did expect that, then that's something that we have to check within ourselves and with our class peers, as opposed to thinking that we somehow didn't deserve or have earned our way out of the realities that generally are externalized to most racialized and colonized and poor folks. So in terms of moving through academia, there's a pretty clear set of expectations. They are applied arbitrarily. But what you can do is, to the best of your ability, satisfy those expectations and have a community outside of this place that are willing to ride for you when things do happen, connect with colleagues and comrades inside of the university. But, I often quote Walter Rodney, where he says that the role of the guerrilla intellectual is to wage struggle where you are. So it's not to be expected, it's not to expect that we won't be subjected to harassment, et cetera, but whether to confront that head on and really illuminate those contradictions and fight back. So that's all that we can do.
Yeah, I mean, I think about that, Dr. CBS, Moja talks about this too when he was working on his MFA, sort of having to challenge, the university several times, and I think that's kind of what you're getting at too. Like, if you're in the academic world, you're going to kind of have to continue to most likely to push back against these institutions regardless. And I love the idea of fighting back where you are. I wanted to ask you about this because this has been really big in the news. I don't know if you've heard about it. It's the United States Israel Futures Act. And what it's looking to do is expand, accelerate bilateral defense technology research, development, testing, evaluation, integration, all of those things between the United States and Israel. I think it's working its way through the Senate right now. I think it does look like it's going to pass. Really scary stuff. On the second to last day of your series about, This Is America, you talked about June Jordan's Intifada USA. And I wanted you to maybe talk a little bit more about that, for our audience. And also, if you know anything about this Futures Act, like what is your response to it, or, just your thought process and, how close are we really to what June Jordan was talking about currently today?
Mm-hmm. So my understanding is that it's kind of like stalled in committee. I think that initially they tried to smuggle this arrangement in the so-called National Defense Act, which is the National War Making Act. And I'm surprised that they haven't changed the name, given that, we now have the Department of War. But they tried to smuggle it in there. There was pushback. And so then there was a sort of bipartisan effort to draft this legislation, both in the House and in the Senate. My understanding is that it's stalled in committee. I don't know if it will pass or not, but I'm not sure how much it matters. These relationships already exist. This sort of bilateral and indeed multilateral relationship, technology sharing, terrorism sharing, if you will, already exists. We can point, for example, to the IDF training of police. Recently, one of those Zionist fascists, Schmortich, I think, was supposed to come here to talk to like this police conference about, training tactics and et cetera, but didn't come because, for reasons. But
motherfuckers got warrants.
Yeah, you feel me? But he been had warrants. He's still free. So, as one, listen, I am, I'm all for people going underground and evading the law to the best of their ability, even when they're my enemies, I guess. But anyways, so these that's just one example of how these relationships already exist. I suppose that having it codified in law might create the conditions for even more repression for contesting and fighting back against Israel. So I'm thinking about like the espionage and subversion acts that were passed during World War One, that then became sort of codified in like the Smith Act in the 1940s, the 1939 Hatch Act, the Internal Security Act. So all of that to say, so it might sort of create the conditions for more repression for that particular type of fight back. But I think that we're already effectively or functionally in that relationship. And this idea, something that I don't understand, I guess, completely. There's all this talk about fascism, right? Fascism is a complete sort of thwarting of the law and jurisprudence and procedure for rule by fiat and dictum. But then we talk about these laws, right? And these laws are supposed to portend fascism, and yet fascism is a supersession of these laws. And so I feel like we have a very kind of incoherent analysis of fascism and what's actually happening. And what are the actual conditions and structures of our immiseration? I don't know that law is going to change much, or that act is going to change much functionally, right? Especially when we have an administration that just does whatever they want anyway. This war that we are in with Iran, luckily getting our ass whooped, is a unilaterally, or I guess bilaterally, between Trump and Israel, like war that was entered into without the approval of Congress, whatever. So to make a short story long, I think it's just a continuation of what is happening, and it's simply a method of codifying in law what is already happening in practice. I guess it's scary. I don't know. That terminology doesn't really resonate with me. It's all scary, right? All of this stuff is scary. The stuff that happens through law, the stuff that happens through vigilantism, the stuff that happens through the whims of those who have the power to wield authority. So, I can't envision how structurally things will change. They're already talking about, I think, maybe not necessarily re-implementing the draft, but there was something that happened that sort of would make it easier or more automatic to implement the draft. So these things were already in place. This sort of hyper militarization of society to the end of the U.S. Continuing its piracy on land in Southwest Asia, more and more in Latin America. These things were already in motion. And so to me, this is just part and parcel of a broader practice that has been happening over the past few decades. But I could be wrong. There could be something particularly nefarious about this act in particular.
Well, no, I think those are all great points. I mean, really well said. It already is so bad. I mean, we say it was bad back then and it's way worse now. And I think that's just really what they're moving towards, that official capacity, what they're already doing behind closed doors, all of the money that's already funneled to Israel. Again, I think it's just, what Trump likes to do and what his administration likes to do is get things that are going to stay there for a while, or just kind of allow people to see that this is an act that's going through, and, down the line, a year or two later, maybe try to pass it again. And, they're always just trying to escalate. But yeah, it's already so bad right now, in terms of connections with Israel.
But now to your question, let me just quickly, I didn't even answer your question about June Jordan. Part of what she was saying in the piece Intifada USA, which was published in December 1990, was basically that, the U.S. under Bush was already funding housing projects in Israel. They were already sending billions of dollars for more weapons deals to Israel. And she was saying that we need to be organized here to stop the attack that was then happening in Lebanon, right? Aggression against Iran, aggression against Jordan that was late 80s, early 90s moment. And so part of what we see is that, again, that this is just a continuation of U.S. Israeli aggression, Western aggression, really, in Southwest Asia. And so, and part of what she pointed out was that the types of funding that Israel is getting supports a particular social safety net that we don't have here. And we don't have it here precisely because that money is going to this war-making apparatus. So
yeah,
sorry.
You did a good job. And, you're so right, because we experience so much here. And I don't know how you guys pay attention to the World Cup. I don't really pay attention to it, but because I'm an inner city left, I just locked into the zeitgeist as much as possible. But all these different people are coming to the country and they're like, wow, how do you have the time and the money and the ability to spend all this time in the United States, and all these European countries and even the global South countries are like, well, they encourage it. We have to pay for rent and healthcare and childcare and all these other things. And we don't, so we can afford to come over here for 2 or 3 weeks. And it's just a totally different vibe. And, Israel's out here with, universal healthcare and daycare, and everyone gets a free house at the expense of someone in the West Bank. Must be nice, I guess. Yeah.
And to your both of your points, right? to really be able to interrogate what challenging that bill would mean would force you to make hard decisions as to what is the difference between intelligence and action, right? When we live in a world where intelligence organizations often work with covert action teams, right? And so when you're looking at the fact that Israel is already a Five Eyes partner, which means intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance is 100% shared with Five Eye nations. So you're already tied to the hip from an intelligence point of view. Anything that Israel intelligence knows, theoretically, American intelligence knows, British intelligence knows, Canadian intelligence knows, and I believe the French, right? So like coordinating that further with the military is less of a stretch, more of just realigning like how you're provisioning, like because actions are already taken. Like I mean, I guess it would clarify like maybe a chain of command, but operatively there is no difference. If you're already sharing ISR, you are militarily tied to the hip. The Americans don't have to give the Ukrainians data if they give it to the British. The British just give it to the Ukrainians, and then the Americans can say, I don't know where they gained it from. And so that's just an interesting thing. But I think those are the kind of things, right, that allow like the social democrats to be able to fight against these kind of things and make that kind of progress. I don't know. It just leads to like, what would you say then about a question that we get a lot is, what is the nature of the factionalization on the left? They're the ways that we come at it, but I think it's always interesting to talk, I guess, intellectually about where these came from, who provides the money, and what makes those different organizations move, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think that historically, this Americanism has stood in for any sort of durable both class consciousness and like Marxist analysis in ways that there's like strong socialist or communist parties in most other Western countries, viable parties that actually produce some sort of counterweight, right? It's not as if they're always represented in governments, but sometimes they are. There's never been, I can't say, so on the very local level. So for example, like Ben Davis was a communist councilman in like the 1940s and 1950s. But then of course, as McCarthyism set in, was imprisoned. So in the kind of local sphere, there's been that presence, but on the national stage, there has not. And I think that because of that, there's all of these different ways that socialists, social democrats, communists take up a particular Marxist analysis. And there are these tiny parties or collectives that are debating oftentimes over theory and the idea of what is to be done, because they're completely irrelevant in real life. And so you have like 50,000 6 to 50 person outfits that agree on probably 90% of things, but then that 10% creates these divisions or factions to the point where some people are willing to cooperate with the government against other people. We saw this with the Socialist Workers' Party and the Communist Party on both sides. People, are not willing to have a parade, okay, a protest, but they're really parades with other organizations because of God knows what. And then you throw in kind of both psyops, and I think some are like just part of epistemological and political terms in the country at large, but then you throw in the kind of different charges against these organizations that have to do with interpersonal relations. And it's really messy. I suppose the way that I see it now and what I've been saying is that everybody could benefit from a lot of political humility. Nobody has won. Even if you have the correct analysis of chapter 5 of Capital, even if you understand exactly what Lenin meant, right, in Collected Works, Volume 9, fascism is still on the march here. And so I don't think anybody should have their ass on their shoulders to be shitting on any other party when nobody has been able to stop a genocide in Gaza. Nobody has been able to sufficiently raise consciousness about what is happening in Sudan. Nobody's been able to stop the recolonization of Haiti. Nobody's been able to stop the slow rolling genocide in Cuba, or to prevent this country from kidnapping a sovereign president in Venezuela, or pressure the government to return that president. So shut the fuck up. So all of this factionalism is just navel gazing and self-aggrandizement. Some of it is state-sponsored. Some of it is our own internalization of liberal and individualist and politics, and our inability to confront in a sober and serious way our complete irrelevance, especially in relationship to the rest of the world. So that's what I think about it.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I love it, man, because we did a show in LA, and someone introduced me as a Marxist-Leninist. Is like, just communist, please. Just communist, and it was like this big thing, and it's like, I respect Marx, I respect Lenin, but I didn't need to read any of those things to reach communism. I grew up a poor Black boy in the hood. We all have communities. We take care of the community. Like, I did not need that praxis to understand where my orientation lie, and I find that to be an interesting thing. I always joke, it's like, they need these factions because they didn't really have gangs, right? Like, I didn't need, like, if I wanted to be a joiner, like, there were real organizations I could have joined, Yeah.
I think that's right. It's funny because I'm in a one of the ABIGLO, Black Greek Letter Organization. I always say, when I mention it, I say, like, I used to gang bang, I don't gang bang anymore. And people like laugh about this, but it's like, there is the sort of group dynamic. It's not always cultish per se, but I think this idea of defending a turf is probably a function of being in a settler colony and not really having anything and constantly being under duress and wanting to be able to fight, but have that fight basically turning inward, right? Because you cannot take down this juggernaut just with your individual organization. And so, I think that criticism and self-criticism are important tools. I think it's important to point out contradictions in other organizations. I think it's important to engage antagonisms. But when they rise to the level of people just being sort of autarkic, if you will, in these organizations and not being willing to work with anybody or share any resources or support anyone, I really don't see what the point of that. Like, okay, great, you get your own cabin in the concentration camp. Good for you. So it's deeply unserious, I think.
Yeah. I mean, people like history is like riddled with these types of people. Like, I wonder, like, the Shah of Iran, like, isn't that uncomfortable for you? Like, to constantly have to sell out and be like that and be isolated and, not really have any true friends. And I think that's another thing too. Again, I don't know how you are, Dr. CBS, but I have a lot of friends that we get to have a lot of good conversations about, and I learn a lot through there. I mean, I do love to read and learn and grow in all those other ways, but I think community is so important. And I always say, I'm not, special because I'm an individual. I'm special because I'm part of a collective. And, and I think that's the spirit and essence, me and Amoja were doing a poetry workshop, and we decided to throw the revolution is, will not be televised in there. And we don't usually do that. We're just like, let me check this out. I'm great poem, even though it's been played a million times. I think everyone can listen to it again. And I always think about, the revolution being up here, and just to further it, I think the revolution has to be in here too. Like, it has to be in your heart a little bit. And the care and love for other people, I think, it is at the core of at least my communism. And I know for me and Tanky as well as it is intellectual. And I think that balance is really important. Not seeing the forest for the trees and, whatever. I'm not great with all the idioms and things, but, I think it is important to remember that, like, we want to make people's lives better. We want to make the world a better place, and we want to implement organization that benefits the general public. I wanted to ask you this because we were talking.
Well, to your point.
Oh, no, go ahead.
Shay says, at the risk of seeming ridiculous, let me say that the true revolutionary is guided by a great feeling of love. It is impossible to think of a genuine revolutionary lacking this quality. And he's not talking about Eros, right? So I'm writing this book on mutual comradeship that really is about, like, the ethical aspects of the ethical and effective aspects of this work. And I think that can, as materialists, that can often fall by the wayside, even though it is what almost inevitably destroys these organizations, is the inability of people to relate to one another and to work through conflict. So I think you're right.
You mentioned one more thing, and you just sparked it when you were talking, is sort of like, the work that we put in, like, I don't know whether it's like seen or unseen, but it's just like, you just got to kind of keep putting the work in for yourself. And, that byproduct of the work that you put in is like kind of good for the people in the movement. And it's like very tough because like you said, we're Americans. Tanky has a song like this where he's like it or not, I'm an American. I act like an American. I think like an American. And, when I meet homies from the global South, whether it's like my cousins in my family or it's just like homies that we meet, they're often kind of weirded out a little bit by sort of the American individualistic way. And even though we're communists and we try to separate ourselves from that, we have been decades within this propaganda machine, that kind of does that as well. So we kind of have, like you said, the humility that we have to kind of take a look at ourselves and go, oh, wait a minute. This is kind of a Western idea. This is kind of a Western thought that I'm doing here, and maybe I should just kind of take a step back.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Did you have anything you wanted to say, Tanky? I thought you was wanting to jump in.
Well, I mean, I was going to ask, I loved the series that you did, the This Is America, and I just want to ask, what was the inciting incident that kind of gave you the inspiration to knock that out? And if any of doing any of those surprised even you, for like how much more you found yourself resonating to some of those people that you brought to, consciousness, not brought to a larger audience of consciousness.
Yeah. And everyone should go check out Dr. CBS's series as well. I'll put all the links in the description, but please go check them out.
Yeah. So basically, I mean, that series kind of came about randomly and for a number of reasons, but one of them is that I really struggle with people who identify as American, right? But many people did, and I didn't. There were a handful of non-USians that were part of that project, but even through their critique was fundamentally rooted in the fact that, like, we are here and this place needs to be transformed into a people-centered, egalitarian society. There was all sorts of ways in which they envisioned that would happen, but like, especially somebody like James Baldwin, like he really identified with the United States, and it really broke his heart that the United States was such a shithole. But then you have, other people who were like, blow it up, So I think that is just what I wanted to lift up. This is the sesquicentennial, right? So you go to the airports and you look around and you just see all of this like Americana and the red, white, and blue. And so I'm like, well, there are people who were not only denizens here, but who believed in the possibility of this thing to be transformed. And these are some of the most radical people. And so it's important to hear from those people. And part of that, it starts with a critique, right? It starts with the understanding of this place is not how it narrates itself. That's not what it is, right? And so I would say there, part of how I was able to do it every day was drawing on stuff that I already knew. So there wasn't a whole lot of like shock value per se. And then a lot of them came from a milieu. Like a lot of the stuff, I would say probably the majority was from like the 40s through 60s, which is a period that I write about and I'm familiar with. So I guess in that regard, Henry Highland Garnett, I would say that what his piece it wasn't that it was surprising, but it's like, he's writing this in like the 1840s or 1850s. He's like, God said you have to fight these motherfuckers. Like, if you submit to slavery, you're not going to heaven because you are disrespecting God. These people are bastardizing what it means to be a godly and righteous person by virtue of enslavement. And even, and actually I found out when I was, reading more about that particular piece, like Frederick Douglass was like, don't say that. Like he thought it was too radical and he was like, nah, bruh, like chill, basically, you know what I mean? Good old Freddie D. And it's interesting because many people, if they know anything about Black people, they will know, like Frederick Douglass, that, what to the slave is the 4th of July, but they don't know, like, let your motto be resistance, which is that piece. And so it's very interesting, like, or, similarly, I've talked about this in other ways when I talk about intellectual McCarthyism, but like people know like Souls of Black Folk from Du Bois, but they don't know like his very trenchant critique, the speeches he gave when he ran for the Senate, when he's talking about like peace and socialism and racial equality. So, that was the function of the project. And then just trying to produce knowledge in a different type of way, because I am an academic. And it really is, I really struggle with making that type of content because I hate the algorithm. I hate boiling things down to 3 minutes so that it will circulate. That's just not, it's very foreign to me. And I think that it can do as much harm as good. But in the final analysis, if this is going to be the way that many people, especially younger folks, consume information, then might as well engage in the battle of ideas in that regard. But I have to also shout out my guy, Chris. His name is John Paul Fart on Instagram. He did all the editing. So he edited like all the videos, like added in the stuff and he's the one that like paid attention to the algorithm, the analytics. I didn't give a fuck. Like, I still don't, you know what I mean? Like, he really cared about that stuff. And I wouldn't have been able to do it like without him. But I really I do think it's important to be able to, if people read nothing, I mean, the point is to get people to read more, but if they read nothing else, you can't say that you didn't know. You can't say that the only thing that you had is fucking Obama. There's all of these other people who mattered and who were important and who had really sophisticated ideas about what this place is and what is to be done.
I mean, and it goes back to a conversation we're having offline about understanding great game politics, because at the time that we had Obama, we also had Hugo Chavez. And if you were a student of geopolitics, you couldn't watch Hugo Chavez move through the world and then be impressed by Obama, right? Like, once again, the global scope of like what leftism looks like in a real way. By the way, a man that Bernie Sanders called a communist dictator, right? Again, just to dispel like any type of illusion of any kind of leftist in the Democratic Party.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Nicolas Maduro is in a Bronx jail somewhere, in Mabdani's city. Anyway,
AOC said, why didn't we get Del C2? I mean, attack him from the right. Like, it's fucking awe-inspiring, actually, just watching them.
Yeah.
The Democrats, I don't know. I don't really know what to say. I don't know what the new low is going to be. I knew there will be one. And I know they got the Project 29 going out, or whatever it is, where they want to get the youth, online ID act and kind of how it is in the UK. And I don't know. That's their vibe.
Imagine thinking that the answer to the Epstein epidemic was to make everyone log their face and information digitally in a central reservoir. Imagine coming with that as the solution to that.
Scary stuff. I got two great communists here, communist minds with me. So I want to show you guys just a little video. There's been a lot being said over the last week or so by the Trump administration about communism and communists and the sort of ridiculous things that we have to listen to as adults in America. The president and his administration was at the NATO summit in Turkey this week. He was asked this by a reporter, someone from the Epoch Times. So I don't want to say it's a reporter, but we'll let it rock. And Dr. CBS, I'll get your response, and maybe Tanky, I can get your response as well.
President Iris Tao.
Who you with?
NTD.
Why don't you say your name and who you're with? It's always helpful.
Thank you, Mr. President, for doing this. Iris Tao with NTD, with a sister media with the Epoch Times.
Okay.
On communism, you've been issuing a wake-up call to Americans at home about the dangers of communism. And now you're speaking on the world stage. What's your message to people both living under communist and socialist regimes, but also people living under democracies like in Europe and America who might not have realized how close communism has come to home?
Yeah, that's a great question, actually. But look, I want to get the word out because what's forming is communism in the country. And communism's easy to sell. I would be the greatest communist in history. I'd be right up there with Lenin. I'd be as good as anybody. You've got free rent for the rest of your life. What they don't say is that you'll be living in squalor in 12 months. You've got the free house. Would anybody like to have a free house? We'll take it away from somebody. We'll give it to you. You'll have murders all over the place. Communism's a disaster. It's been proven to be for thousands of years under different names, but same thing. It's very important. And, it's...
So, of course, you can just say anything you want. It doesn't matter at all. There was something that I got from you, Dr. CBS, before you respond. There was a tweet by the White House, and if you follow the White House and like their official Twitter pages, they're absolutely insane. They say absolutely insane things. But they said you can be a communist or you can be a patriot. You can't be both. And you kind of were like, well,
period.
Yeah.
I agree. But what's funny is that, but now you have this whole like MAGA communism thing. So I'm kind of glad that they said that, right? Because the MAGA, it's a literal contradiction of terms, right? Like this MAGA communism or this patriotic socialism. I guess I think they're doing like Browderism or something. But like, I think that Trump is right. Like you can be a patriot and you can believe in U.S. imperialism. You can believe that this place is not the biggest purveyor of violence, ecological destruction, and death dealing in the world, right? Or you can critique those things. You can be anti-imperialist. You can be for people and ecological flourishing over profit and for peace, right? Peace, not pacifism. And you will be called a communist. So you don't even have to be a communist, but we have to understand is how how communism operates as a catch-all for anybody who is against the hyper-individualist, super exploitation and imperial domination of the world, right? If you can call anybody from Martin Luther King, right, through to like Claudia Jones, a communist, and that is a very wide swath of people that encompasses a very wide swath of issues, from racial equality to living wages to humane working conditions to literal, socialist transformation. All of those things get caught up in the dragnet of who is and is not a communist. And so effectively what Trump is saying is you can believe in like the death dealing duopoly, or you can be an enemy to it. And to be an enemy to it is really to be on the side of like the rest of the world. So it's, it's a choice. And this, as they say, like history doesn't repeat itself, but it rhymes. It's something that has been happening especially since 1917, but even before, prior to 1917, it was like the German socialists and the anarchists. And those were like, all kinds of legislation and all kinds of statutes and laws were passed to try to quell those tendencies, especially as more and more people from Eastern Europe began to migrate to the United States. All kinds of, there's all these confluences, but at bottom, the sort of anti-communism and anti-radicalism more broadly is deeply jingoistic. It's deeply racist. It is deeply exploitative and ultimately white supremacist. And, there's these kind of memes of the billboards from like the 40s, 50s, and 60s. That's like the KKK, the KKK is against the communists or whatever, and painting, Martin Luther King as a communist because he went and trained at Highlander, but the KKK was against communists as much as they were against sort of Black folks who were organizing for racial equality. So, I think it's very telling. And this is not distinct from that group of Democrats that put out whatever statement or whatever memo saying that they disagreed with socialism. Wasn't there like a handful of Democrats who came out because of like the three social
Democrats?
I do remember something like that. Yeah.
There's always just enough Democrats.
And AOC was all like, oh, those socialist countries. Oh, but not the ones in South America. I mean, like Norway. So yeah, they've definitely had some sayings about that.
And I think it was like a few days ago, there was like something that was signed by Democrats who are basically pushing back against their own ostensible party members, saying like, we're not like them. Their ideas do not resonate with our own. So,
Nancy Pelosi famously said, I'm a capitalist. I mean, you know what I'm saying? So like, to Yo's point, right? I think what happens, and it goes back to the lack of understanding of advanced numbers because of just the weakness of American education. You don't understand what a billionaire is. There's no way I can make you understand it, but I can give you a model. If I took you back to 1 AD and gave you $100,000 every year, and you didn't have to use any of that money to live, and there were no taxes, and you also were somehow immortal, and we're now in this year of our Lord 2026, you still would not be a billionaire. If you were making $100,000 a year and we started you at year 1, you would not be a billionaire yet. You don't understand how irrational to accrue that level of wealth is, right? And then to try to rationalize it with Western enlightened thought of all men are created equal, not while wealth inherits, right? So when you talk about communism, to me, I'm just trying to help America meet the ideals that they wrote, that they seem to claim to want to achieve. And we understand the dual nature of the men that were writing these words because they talked about freedom and went home and forced themselves on 14-year-old Black people. So, but at the end of the day, let's for once try to make America even attempt to achieve the rhetoric that we were taught to venerate and worship. I don't see how you can get there without communism. If you think that 10,000 people should suffer so that one person can accrue more wealth than they could ever spend literally in 5 lifetimes, we used to make movies about these things. The Richard Pryor Brewster's Millions, where like the whole point is try to give this dude this extraordinary amount of money, and he has to spend it all and so much time. And he finds that once you reach a certain amount of money, it's no longer possible to lose it because everything you buy starts to accrue wealth in another way. The game cannot be fixed without communism. But again, maybe you're the kind of person that feels like one person deserves the wealth that could easily sustain 10,000 other people. I grew up thinking those people were monsters.
It's like, how could a system that you say is a success because of the 1% of wealthy people and the 90% of people that are living in poverty, or the 900,000 homeless people, it's a personal failing. But the system is great. Oh, but in China, we don't really have homelessness. Oh, but in these countries, we don't really, Iran spends a ridiculously low amount on their military equipment compared to the United States, because the United States is all about grift. It's all about corruption. Go back to Syriana. Corruption is why we win. You know, corruption is what keeps us safe and warm. You know, and this just kind of is, to Dr. CBS's point, it's like it's been happening. During COVID, all that money floated up, the biggest transfer of wealth in American history. Not to mention you had the 2008 bubble, and you got this AI bubble. I mean, it's just so many little, the fellowship is on the edge of a knife, and at any time, the Strait of Hormuz. I mean, I do want to talk a little bit about that now. Actually, now that I mentioned it up, I sparked my own question. The Ayatollah Khomeini just had a funeral. It was up to, I don't know if you heard this, 200 million people. I'm sorry, 2 million people.
20 million.
20 million. Yes, 20 million. Thank you. And I was reading about your George Jackson when he was writing his letter to his lawyer and just talking about, obviously Black people, but just in a broader sense, the Ayatollah, 12 to 20 million people, so much support for Palestine. Now I'm seeing more about Congo, more about Cuba, obviously Lebanon experiencing a G-side, Sudan also a part of that group. And I think, and this is what I was talking with Tanky, now this is really for both of you guys, like, do you feel as if people are resonating more with the global South? Do you think that people are more interested in communism? And, also just kind of your thoughts on the funeral and Iran and all those other things. Dr. CBS, I'll let you go first, and then Tanky, just, whatever you felt from that particular question.
I mean, yes and no. I mean, first of all, I do not think that, I think the population is a lot less informed and tapped in than we think it is. And so the things that we know, we can't assume that people who just ordinary people, and this is not to say that we're extraordinary in some way, but people who don't read books, the thousands and millions of people who are like outsourcing their brain capacity to ChatGPT, they are completely inured to what is happening in the world. So I think that some people are becoming politicized and radicalized at this moment. I think primarily because of their own deteriorating material conditions, primarily because of the live streamed war intensified G-side, as you called it, that is happening in Gaza and Lebanon. I think that other people are more, especially our own people, Black people in the South. I was talking to one of my comrades who lives in Atlanta, and he's like, there's a lot of Black conservatives. There's a lot of people who are more and more identifying with conservatism and with Trump and with this particular, fascism. And we think that, I guess, that racialized people are not fascist because of the racism within fascism. But if you look at a place like the Dominican Republic, you can see how racialized people can very much.
I'm not Black and Dominican, man.
Yeah, and they literally had they literally had a fascist regime there. And so I think there are more people who are becoming disillusioned with the U.S. system, with the ideals or the lies of liberal democracy. But the choice is socialism or barbarism. We cannot discount barbarism. We cannot discount the appeal or allure of fascism, that because it's had in this place a 250-year head start vis-a-vis socialism, because it is the face of power and access and authority in this country, that is quite appealing. Especially when people believe in an American dream logic, where if you either work hard or do the right things or have the right connections, you could be the next person in power. And so if the question is about USians identifying more with the global South, it's a mixed bag, because I think that also Schadenfreude is real, right? There's kind of the ways that people who are victimized distance themselves and, in fact, revel in the sort of violence or repression of another group because that allows them to distance themselves, right? That allows them to disidentify even more with that group. So I don't know. I'm not super I'm not super optimistic. I think that in the short and medium term, it might be barbarism. And that, getting to that sort of level of destitution might help to inaugurate a different era, a different sort of level of organizing for socialism and radicalism. But I'm not super optimistic because I don't think that we can underestimate the real decline in our material conditions for the majority of people. And this includes like our food, right? We're going to have even more pesticides in our food. There's going to be shit in our water.
They live next to a data center.
Yeah, they're like literal shit, like literal poop, because they're Trump rolled back the whatever. So it's like it's the food that we eat, it's the air that we breathe. It's all alongside like the schools that we go to, the media we consume, the houses we live in. Like it's hard to, on the one hand, we think that really will light a fire under people's ass. On the other hand, if people just can't even afford to pay attention, if they're just trying to survive to the next day, it's very, very hard to have like the long game vision that I think revolutionary struggle requires. So I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, and to that point, right, anger that you can't funnel into something transformative is just stress. You know what I'm saying? It's like you're angry, but you don't organize, so you don't know that your feelings are the feelings that everyone else feels. You resent your neighbor in the contemporary American society. You're keeping up with the Joneses, and he seems to be doing just a little bit better than you, or you're doing a little bit better than him, and that makes him less worthy, right? Like, so long as that mind state exists, right, where you're so hyper individual, there's no way to coalesce. And this is why I say again, less than a week ago, Congress talked about continued conversations about MK Ultra. I remember that was one of the earliest things that brought me to the left as a young man. And back then it was still conspiracy theory, even though they had already had, congressional committee hearings about it, right? These are programs that were supposed to end in the 60s, and then they were supposed to end and be wrapped up in the 70s. And yet we're still having congressional meetings about them, which leads you to believe that these things carry on. And it's more than just like, oh, mind control. Mind control isn't a magic thing. It's more like controlling minds, understanding how programming works, setting up, this group, that group, the factionalism that we joked about earlier, even as we were talking about, there are a lot of Southern Blacks that are incredibly conservative. That's not regional. Black people are incredibly conservative, or they're flaming radical liberals or leftist, right? Like there's very little centrism in Black community. I think about was it Nas less than a week ago that puts out this tweet, this super anti-immigrant tweet, right? Because he's representing this wealthy bourgeois celebrity class that is so detached from any of the Blackness that he would have been accustomed to in his youth, so as to be a totally different identity, right? So long.
Black Republican was like 20 years ago.
Right.
Nicki Minaj is fucking Trinidadian. It's like, and I maybe she got papers now, but I think that, you know what I mean? Like your partner is a pedophile, which means that, or whatever, which means that they have been part of the, the criminal punishment system. And it's like, and these are the people that you're, yeah. So but I do think Black conservatism is probably more like centrism. It's not right wing. It's not like the ultra right wing. The Black in anything is always going to position it in a particular way vis-a-vis like the mainstream. So I will say they're conservative intra-communal, or they're conservative overall, but like they're probably more centrist than like super ultra like right wing in a general sense, I would say.
Yeah, I think that was one of the, just again, to your point, that was one of the issues that Kamala ran into when she was when she was canvassing down south, and she has that California liberal mentality that is predisposes one to assume, oh, this is what blackness is, and these are, to say nothing of her dubious ties to blackness as they relate to herself. But like, she had a lot of trouble connecting with black women in Georgia, especially because, like, these are women like my mother. These are women that are not the world's strongest abortion, advocates. These are not the most sex positive, and like, you can't go there with that mentality and having a stunt like, oh, this is just what, we represent, those things are real things. And yeah, so I will say they're not like, let's go make ICE facilities. But, you have no further to go back than like Bernie Mac, right? And like, again, like not someone you would consider a progressive in the sense of the word that we would today. And these are just struggles that we come up with. I think especially being overly Christianized down south, with that meaning a very particular way of walking through the world in an acceptable way. People pull away from that. But this is why I say, again, I don't fight the term American as much as many do. I don't use it as a badge of honor, just an admission of reality. Like, there is a culture that exists here, and even the most radical mind is incredibly conservative compared to like global South leftism. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
W.E.B. Du Bois, and of course the dual consciousness. It's Du Bois, by the way. I don't know if you know that. Okay.
Double consciousness is like a classic. I don't know. I don't know. I don't know about double consciousness, but yeah. Got to think more about that. I wrestle with it. I think it's a very classed understanding of, or a very class experience in the way that he describes it. Because I don't know that it's double for regular Black folks. It's just, like, to me, like code switching is not double consciousness. It's just consciousness it's an integrated consciousness, not integrated in terms of integration, but like there's one consciousness that articulates itself because you understand. That's why I for one of my This Is America days, I did Eslanda Robeson, and she talked about how like Black folks know white folks as much as they know themselves, and far better than white folks know Black folks because of they worked in their homes all of this time. And so because of that deep knowledge, right? Like, it's not I don't think it's a double consciousness. It's like, they think they know us. We actually know them, and we know ourselves better. So I don't know. So I have to think more about, I think double consciousness.
No, I love it.
Yeah.
I think about consciousness as a stack, right? Like with operating systems, you'll find like the operational core of like, this is what it means to be humanity. And then you add cultural straps on top of all of those things. So there's an American consciousness. There is a Black consciousness. From there, you may have additional identities that you hold on to, and they carry certain subsets and expectations. But you can strip all those stacks away. That's what war is. And this is why so many people have such a difficult time realigning themselves, because they come to learn that consciousness is actually a construct that can be peeled away at any given time. Civilization teaches you don't kill people that haven't put your life in extreme danger or that are not presenting some type of imminent threat to you. And as a soldier, you may have to kill a person you've never seen before without question. Like, this requires a peeling away of certain expectations of what civilization represent, right? And these are just things as Americans that we run on and don't consider at any given time. But these things can be shattered and realigned, which again goes back to the whole essence of what they were working on with the MK Ultra projects.
Yeah, I mean, all great discussions. Of course, we could, and this goes to your point, Dr. CBS, of there needing to be a little bit more than just a few minutes of discussion about a certain thing, because it is about the discourse between people. And of course, I of course defer to both of you guys. Tremendously knowledgeable on these kind of things. And Dr. CBS, I do want to thank you so much for being on the show today. Oh, real quickly, everyone, hey, do you see this? Go buy this. The link is in the description. Put it in your library, put it in your backpack so you can read it. whether it's a little dense, I will say, but it's really worth it. And, it's, Dr. CBS, I don't know if you know do you know the average amount of books people read last year?
Probably 2 to 3.
Yeah, 0.7. The average person read less than one book last year. And to your point about reading and it being so, reading is fundamental. Okay, we try to teach us this growing up, but it is absolutely necessary to the movement. And Dr. CBS's book is a really great place to start. Just a shout out to our podcast listeners.
Great place to start.
Oh, okay. Well, it's
start with somewhere. Yeah. And also it's, about Anna's archive. It's on there. There's a PDF of that thing floating all around. So if you don't want to buy it, you don't have to.
Well, support if you want, gain the knowledge either way.
Mm-hmm.
And you can always start off with something a little bit less intense or I don't know, bigger words, maybe. I don't know. There's little words in there, but maybe that's I mean, big font. I read the books with the big font. You got the little font in there. Big words, but little font. Shout out to our podcast listeners. Shout out to our Patreon. Please support Dr. CBS. All of the links will be in the bottom. Dr. CBS, you are the absolute best. We really appreciate every time you come on the show and drop the knowledge. We appreciate you rocking the shirt. We're going to send you some more things.
Yeah, woo, woo, woo. Get your merch, y'all. Inner City Left.
Yes, we trying to take over the space, or not take over. Maybe that's not a great communist word, but spread our little communist tentacles throughout the.
Freedom is spread through the barrel of a rifle. I read that somewhere.
Yeah. But. Having me, y'all.
Dr. C, is there any final things you just wanted to say? Any things you wanted to kind of just take us out to, or anything you wanted to pub?
Read the Anti-Imperialist Scholars Collective, our magazine. It is called My Pen is My Machete. The website is anti-imperialist.com. There's amazing analysis about Iran, Venezuela, Cuba, the internal colonies, all from an anti-imperialist perspective. So if you want to start with shorter, probably more graspable ideas, you can start there. So join an organization.
There it is. For Mojo Latangi Sumler, for Dr. CBS, I am Amin TMK. This is the Inner City Left broadcast. Peace.
System riding to the core. Yeah. Reppin' Inner City Left.